Hello folks, Emily the Pharmacist Witch here. Today I'd really like to talk about a group of medications called the GLP-1 agonists, or glucagon-like peptide receptor agonists. This is a class of medications, most of which are injectables, though one semaglutide is also available as a pill. These are the medications like Ozempic and Wegovy, Zepbound and Mounjaro, Trulicity, Victoza, this whole class of medications. I remember when these first came out, I remember when Trulicity came out, I was in pharmacy school and it was like a game changer in the world of diabetes management. And when I became a diabetes educator and my job was prescribing these medications, I was a big fan, right? I saw people losing weight. I saw people's A1Cs come down. I saw, improvement in so many biomarkers. And of course, there were always the complaints, right? People had nausea. Sometimes it was intolerable. People, described other adverse events that I'll talk about in a moment. And I went on prescribing these, and it was almost like a personal mission to try to get everybody who could be on one of these medications on one, because I had seen how effective they were. And then, they started to become more popular for weight loss, and that's great. Again, I had seen the proof play out in diabetes management. So many folks were losing weight on them, and all was fine until I started thinking about the fact that when people come off of these medications, I'm thinking about weight loss right now, the weight comes back. So people who, are taking these medications for weight loss, in theory, will be on them indefinitely, right? Once the guidelines right now, once you're on one, you're on it for life. And it really started to not feel so good that I was participating in this process. And I didn't quite know why. So, I started doing some Googling and I found this really interesting article. It was not a medical literature article. It was in the Los Angeles Book Review. It's an article by Christoph Peck. I'll link it in the notes in the description of the video. But Christoph had noticed people in his circle talking about taking the medications, and he had started sort of trawling through Reddit groups and people who were talking about their experiences on these medications, knowing that a lot of the data looking at off-target effects would be years down the road before he had access to it. But he described a lot of the effects that we were seeing. A lot of them were good, right? Not only were people having improvement in diabetes management and weight loss, but they were maybe all of a sudden not drinking as much or at all. All of a sudden, maybe they were not having cigarette cravings. They weren't gambling like they were. So we were seeing a whole bunch of different effects from these medications, a lot of which were really good. And we started thinking about these drugs as a possible panacea. But in Christoph's article, that's not the point, right? He talks about how, yes, we are seeing these effects. And that's largely because the way these medications work, they are agonists at the glucagon receptor, glucagon-like peptide receptor. And we know we have those receptors in our gut, which accounts for a lot of the effects we're seeing with weight loss, but we also have those receptors in our brain, in our hypothalamus. And we're not 100% sure still how these medications are working to have these other effects. Right? It's a fallacy for us to know 100% how any medication is working in the body. It's something I've come to appreciate. So in his article, he talks about all of these interesting effects, and he found some folks who had described their own experiences taking these medications. And he compared it to, especially people who had had really profound responses. So they compared it to having their desire shifted overnight, right? Where one day they had cravings for peanut butter cups. The next day, the cravings for peanut butter cups were gone. And he uses some fun analogies to illustrate the point. He says, we don't have a lot of examples in our lives to describe a shift in desire and preference that happens that quickly. Like maybe becoming a parent, overnight your desires change because you have a new person that you're responsible for. But he says even that is a bit of a gradual change, right? That, it starts when you find out you're pregnant or your partner's pregnant, and then, the first ultrasound, and then, it's a series of things that sort of prepare you mentally for the new desires you'll have when that baby is born. And so he tries to come up with an example of your desire shifting overnight. He talks about what if someone told you that tomorrow you would be a vampire? You'd be a very happy vampire, right? But your preferences would all be different. Your desires would all be different than they are right now. You would prefer to drink blood and sleep in a coffin and live in a castle in Transylvania, right? Your preferences would change overnight. And the tricky bit is that future version of you, that vampire version of you, wouldn't really be able to evaluate the decision that you are making right now, you as human you. So there's a little bit of like philosophical, ethical, moral ambiguity or uncertainty in that whole equation, this idea of desire. And so, I was kind of bearing all of this in mind, and I was starting to think about desire in a spiritual context. Desire, if we look at the root of that word, désir, right, in the French, of sir, father, right, of the father. So if we think of desire as something that we're born with from, either our biological father, that might be fun to think about, or from, some kind of spiritual father, it's interesting to think about that changing because of something that we're doing. And I started to look more carefully at the folks who were coming in, who I had prescribed these medications for, what they were experiencing in their lives taking these medications. And there were some interesting things. I remember a husband and wife coming in, and the wife was the one taking the injectable medication, the GLP-1. And she had no desire for food anymore. She was eating the same foods because that was what she was used to. She was just eating a whole lot less of it, and she wasn't having the cravings that she used to. So there's something to be said there about choosing nourishing food. These medications are not necessarily helping people choose more nourishing foods. So she was eating the same thing, just a whole lot less. And her husband was there, and he said, yeah, she doesn't eat it, but she wants me to eat more. So that desire had shifted for her, but there was a part of her that knew that it was still desirable to eat that food, and she was, she wanted to see someone else enjoy it. So that was an interesting take. And then I had a patient who was a musician, very talented musician, and he came in and his diabetes was perfectly controlled. And he had lost weight, and he was feeling good in a lot of ways. And he told me, though, that he had no desire to play his guitar anymore. And I thought, oh, that's kind of sad. This desire, this passion, perhaps this gift that you were born with, you don't want anymore, or your desire has so shifted. And I don't want to diminish how these medications can really profoundly help someone, right? I've seen people, again, have much healthier numbers, and I've also seen people feel better in their skin. There are, I met folks who maybe because of their weight, they were too self-conscious to go to the gym, which let's not make anyone feel that way, right? Like, let's not make anyone feel self-conscious going to the gym. But folks who were too self-conscious to go to the gym, they started one of these medications, lost 50 pounds, and then felt like they could go exercise, right? So this is, in that setting, these drugs can be really valuable allies. They can be very helpful. But I guess the thing I would keep in mind is they are not a panacea, right? They are not the fix for what ails our world, or at least our U.S. population, despite the fact that 76% of adults over age 20 are either overweight or obese. This isn't necessarily the answer for everyone. For some folks, sure, but I think for the folks that are trying these medications, I would say let's try to balance that out with nourishing your innate desire? What is it that really brings you alive? What is it that gets you excited about your life? What is your gift to share with the world? And let's make sure that as you're taking a medication like this, that you're not losing that, because that's an important part of you. So, I'm trying to present this with as much equanimity as I can, having had some time to reflect on it, going from early in my career when I was so excited about these medications and I wanted everyone to be on them, to the point where it was actually this class of medications that caused me to leave my job as a pharmacist. So I'm trying to kind of find the middle ground here. And I just think, let's be thoughtful. Let's ask ourselves some questions. If we want to start these medications, if we want to prescribe these medications, it's a big commitment to take one of these forever, right? For the rest of your life. And it's a big step to think about how it might shift your desire and what you want for your life. So just a note to be thoughtful. And if you have an interest in talking more about this, I host discussion groups on Mondays. We talk all about consciousness and the mind, and it could be fun to chat with people who are interested in chatting about this. I'll link the Eventbrite for that as well. But thank you all for listening.